Dear friends and dear colleagues, in this lesson today, we will see in deep details all the steps that will take you or your lab technician, more likely, to the construction of a prosthetic shell to be used in combination with the Weldman or the econometric concept. We have today with us Gianluca Sighinolfi, who is a master lab technician that works with me since ages. So, the process manufacturing is the last step among all the steps we've been through in the previous lectures. So we have been through every single requirement. Now the last one, as you see in the slides, is the manufacturing of a prosthetic shell. That can be done with a couple of techniques. Basically, it can be done with a whole analog process or through a complete digital workflow. So we decided to divide this into lessons. For this reason, we have now an hour where we discuss this analog approach. And the next lesson, we will discuss all the digital aspects of a construction of a digital shell. Whether it's CAD/CAM or print, we will see that. Okay. So I think now it's time for me to hand it to Gianluca. So Gianluca, have fun and please explain to the dentist or to the lab technician the secret of the manufacturing of an analog shell. Thank you.
You're welcome. The prosthetic shell manufacturing for the Weldman technique is for sure an easy procedure for a dental technician, especially with the help of commercial teeth. And why I normally use commercial teeth? Because the new generation of commercial teeth were born in order to help the implant work, especially changing the shape, the shade, and the texture of the commercial teeth respect to the past. And for sure, I cut a lot of time during the manufacturing because the aesthetics is ready-made, and you see immediately the new aesthetic of the patient when you place in position a new commercial teeth.
So can we say that among the many advantages to use commercial teeth is the quality of the aesthetics? I mean, I'm saying compare to something that you made yourself with a digital approach. So we are not criticizing the digital approach, but I just want to say that my understanding is that there is something that is ready-made and that has a lot of beautiful characteristics that is not so easy to copy and to mimic when it comes to make this tooth, these teeth, this shell yourself. Is this correct?
Yes, because the commercial teeth, especially in the anterior region, is very particular because have a 5 layer of different color in every kind of tooth, and the shape and the texture is very, very, very natural And the cutback of the enamel is very particular, and it's very impossible to have the same result with a block of milling material.
Okay, let's say that for those dentists that like to do everything themselves, because many dentists will simply send and ask this to the labs, and the labs will basically do the job and the shell. But some dentists do every steps, including the analog. And I think another advantage is that they do not require any budget, not big financial investment, as is normally required to buy a video, a camera, a mill machine, and so on.
Yes.
Okay.
And another big advantage is for the commercial teeth. The last generation of commercial teeth is the resistance, for sure, because in the top line of every brand, there is very important to have a good resistance, and this is because in the external surface of the teeth you have an inorganic material, and only in the external and last layer of the 5 layer. And this is important because the wearability resistance is good, and the polish for the anterior is good for a long time. And in the top line of this brand, if you look in the table, every brand have a composite in the last layer, in the enamel. And it's possible to select the full contour or only veneer, but doesn't change. The external surface of the tooth is made by composite.
So when you say resistance, you mean resistance to abrasion,
to abrasion,
or resistant to impact loads and forces?
For sure, in the abrasion.
Okay, so there is the wearability.
The wearability resistance, sorry, yes. And doesn't change if the tooth is full contour or veneer. And in every teeth, the internal surface is made by PMMA in order to have a good link between the new tooth and the acrylic when the composite is not required.
So it's better for bonding.
For bonding,
okay. With the relining material.
If you fill with the acrylic, or if you place a primer, it's very easy to open the link between the teeth and the new composite.
Okay.
This is for every brand, but only in the external layer.
So we have seen now 5 types of top quality commercial teeth.
5 different brands, yes.
And obviously, our students will want to know when you select a Brident or a Candulor or a Creopal, whatever. So I understand there are different kinds, and all of them are excellent teeth. Is there any particular reason why you select?
Yes.
Sometimes one tooth and another time another one.
Yes, it's not about the wearability resistance, but it's about the shape of the teeth. Because in the mold chart, you have a lot of different shape, and I select the new teeth only respect the shape, not for the color or not for the wearability resistance, only for the different shape.
Okay, so thank you for this quick exposition about the different kind of denture teeth. Now, we know that there are different kinds of shell. And according to different countries, they get different names. But basically, the concept is the same. Some shells are just white, and some shells are white and pink. Now, this can be a very rudimentary classification. And there are obviously more sophisticated classification. But at the end of the story, this is what it is. So we normally call the white shell a socket fit shell, and the white and pink a hybrid shell. Sometimes beyond the ocean, they call FP1, FP2, and FP3. That is not to be confused with the surgical mask now today. But let's say these are another way to classify, according to my beloved mentor Carl Misch. Let's see what is a socket fit, because this is the terminology that we are going to use. A socket fit restoration, as we can read here, is a full arch bridge that only has artificial teeth on it and has no artificial gum. The fitting surface of the bridge is scalloped, as if the teeth were individually emerging from the natural gum. Implant must be placed in the correct emergence of the future crown. So, with socket fit, we have to put implant in the right position. Okay. Axis we can discuss, as with conometric is less important, but the implant cannot be placed in between. Hybrid, on the contrary, you can place the implant wherever you want, as the emergence of the axis of the implant versus the shape and the emergence of the tooth is not important, since you have now also all a big part of pink tissue restored. So let me read. A hybrid full arch bridge is a fixed bridge that is a hybrid of both artificial teeth and artificial gum. And the fitting surface is more often convex, better convex, easy to clean. An implant, as I said, can be placed independently. So, white or pink? Let's show us how you make a white shell and how many types of white shell do we have.
Okay. In the first case, I show one full arch upper restoration and take the impression and develop the model. And also you have a lot of the information in the paper. Sorry, but I think it's in Italian. And it's important for me to have the color. It's important for me to have if the mediana is good or not, and if you need to change, and also the smile line. And for sure, if it's white or pink. In this case, it's white. And
so this is all the information that the doctors are sending to you.
Yes,
okay.
I think it's very important, because now you have a big rosette in the mouth of the patient, and if you need to change the mediana and the smile line of the patient, it's important to have this kind of important parameter for to change or not, because in this case the patient have a good parameter and I copy this, and for this reason I select the same shape of the commercial teeth.
So if you want to go back to this slide that unfortunately is in Italian, but this is what we normally use daily. So once again, what is the information that you need to know from the dentist? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the most important and so on?
For sure,
okay.
the color, For sure, if the restoration is a hybrid or is a white restoration, is important the mediana and the smile line, if it's good or not.
The midline and the smile line.
Smile line, sorry. And if you open the flap or not, and if you make some osteoplastic or not, and nothing.
This is the most important
Yes.
information for you. So you know that this is going to be a socket with shell.
Yes, and if it's long lasting, it's only temporary, because sometimes is important because I select a different kind of teeth or different material to assemble the shell.
Okay, if this is just a quick temporary, it's supposed to stay for longer time.
This is for the long-lasting restoration.
Yeah, let's go.
I selected the only veneer in this particular case with the right color and shape. And now it's time to remove the incisor and the lateral and place in position the new veneer with a little drop of wax. This for don't change the midline, the smile line, like in the mouth. And also the inclination. For this reason, I don't like to remove a lot of incisor in the same moment. I prefer to remove only a couple of incisors, and with the help of the other, I place in position with the right inclination or the same inclination the new commercial teeth. The same approach for the posterior teeth. Remove exactly in the neck of the tooth and place in position the new commercial tooth, before in one side and after in the other side. Again, start with the same approach, remove the incisor and place in position the new, and the same for the posterior. Now, for sure, it's time to increase the lingual surface, because the commercial veneer don't have the lingual surface, and add some wax and get the mask. After the curing of the silicone, open the mask, remove the wax, and now it's time to sandblast the teeth and put on the primer in order to open the link between the commercial teeth and the new flowable composite. Put the primer and place in the device for 3 minutes. After the curing, place again in the mask, and with the flowable enamel composite, link tooth by tooth. And again, it's time to curing in the unit. After the curing, cut the mask and remove the restoration inside the silicone. Now the restoration more or less is completely empty. It's important to increase the empty space, increase the embrasure, check for sure the occlusion, polish, some color, add some color if you want, and only now the restoration is ready for the day of the surgery. This is the picture of the day of the surgery, immediately after the placement, and this is some time later.
Some months later.
I think for sure it's very natural, because it's exactly the copy of the terminal dentition of the patient.
Yes, obviously this is something that we discuss with the patient the day he comes for the first time. Okay, if he likes the appearance of her teeth, if he want to change color, anything, inclination, length, all the things that every dentist has to know. So we make a very thoroughly discussion with the patient, so that we understand all the needs and the expectation that the patient has. Okay, so this is a socket shell, socket fit shell done with
veneers
Okay.
in the upper.
In the
Now the same approach and the same veneer, but in the lower. And in this particular case, is need to change the midline, respect the upper, and I think is a good choice now. And only now I start to extract the incisor and the cuspid, and select the commercial veneer and place in position with this approach with a little drop of wax, sticky wax, and the new mediana for the patient. Now, the other incisor, lower incisor, and the cuspid. The inclination more or less is the same inclination of the other side of the mouth, and it's time to remove the posterior teeth, first and second premolar, with a round bar. It's very easy to remove the plaster in this area, and now take the posterior and place with a little drop in position again. And the molar, the same approach. And for sure is only veneer and need to shape the lingual surface, because don't have this part in the restoration. In the other side, the same approach before the incisor, the cuspid, and the posterior. Now the setup is ready. It's possible to check the occlusion, the movement, and now it's time to get the mask. And 2 minutes and remove the mask. And for sure it's time to clean every veneer to the wax and sandblasting, and put on the primer for opening the link mesially, distally, and lingually. 3 minutes in the device and place again in the mask. Now, with the flowable composite, it's time to link tooth by tooth with a flowable enamel or dentin, or some neck if you want, depends on the area. The big advantage when you use the only veneer is the space, because you have the empty space immediately. After the curing, cut the mask and open the mask. Now retrieve the restoration. Again, place in the device for a couple of minutes for the final curing of the composite. And now it's time to increase the empty space, the internal empty space, and increase the abrasion. Again, some rubber, and start to polish the restoration. It's very easy to polish mechanically, and if you want, place some color, some stain in the sulcus, in the lingual surface, because for us the lingual and buccal, the occlusal and the buccal surface are the final surface for this restoration. And now the restoration for sure is ready for the surgery, made by veneer and composite.
So this was basically a presentation on a couple of white shell done with veneers.
Yes.
What is next?
The next is the full contour teeth, and this is another approach, but more or less for me is the same. Doesn't change in the approach, only in the manufacture of the teeth, because it's completely full teeth. Look the case, again the model in the articulator. And now it's time to select the commercial teeth. And now is a very important step, because the layer of composite is a very thin external layer of the tooth. And if you change a lot the shape of the tooth, you remove completely the composite in this case. For this reason, it's very important to select the incisor and also the posterior with the same dimension. And if you look in the mold chart, for sure you have the incisor and also the molar or the premolar with the same dimension of the existing situation. In this particular case, look, more or less is the same the incisor and also the posterior.
So they just need to have some mold chart of some different companies to find which one fit best to the case that we are going to do.
Yes,
right?
And yes, and you start with the order, because it's impossible to have every color and every shape of every brand, because it's a lot of money for sure, a lot of material in your box for sure. But if you have a mold chart, you order this kind of teeth, and after a couple of days you have the teeth, and start with the same approach. Select the incisor and place in position the incisor. Remove and place. And the same approach for every tooth.
So you mentioned once that you just grind out the tooth, the shape of the tooth. You do not over prepare the stone, the plaster, right? So you do not make an extra.
Yes. If you remove a lot of plaster, especially in the septum, it's possible to have a problem in the future when the doctor try the shell in the mouth, because if you touch a lot of bone or very hard tissue, it's impossible to fit completely the restoration. And for this reason, I think it's better if you remove the existing tooth exactly in the limit of the neck. When you look where is the position of the neck, you remove the tooth and place again in position. For sure, it's very easy if you remove a lot of plaster and place in position every tooth, but every teeth. But I think it's not a good idea. Premolar and molar, and again in the other side the same.
So this is one of the reasons why sometimes the dentists complain, because they get the shell, they extract the teeth, and they try the shell, and the shell start to rock, start to be unbalanced, and so they don't understand that. They ask the patient to bite down, and then they end up to crack or crash the shell, right? So this is because the lab technician is being too generous to remove the plaster. Okay.
And sometimes you have some mistake in the vertical dimension, because if the shell doesn't fit, for sure you increase the vertical dimension.
Oh. Okay.
In the other side, the same approach. remove and place, remove and place. And again, premolar and molar. The first molar, but not the second one. And now it's time to increase the lingual surface because otherwise it's very thin, the restoration. With the wax, shape the lingual surface and get the mask again. After the curing, open the mask, remove the wax and sandblast it tooth by tooth. Place again into the mask, and select one acrylic, one PMMA, mix and press into the master cast. After the setting time, open the mask, check the occlusion, and for sure increase the abrasion, some rubber, polish, some color, and the restoration is finished and is ready for the surgery, but it's time to grind a lot of material inside because I select a full contour teeth and add other PMMA. And now it's time to grind it with a round bar. And only now the shell is ready for the day of the surgery. Now,
What next?
this is a pink shell. In this particular case, the patient has a mobile prosthesis in good condition for sure. The vertical dimension is good. And in this particular case, I like to have a duplicate of the prosthesis in the lab. Why the step to achieve the duplicate of the prosthesis? Some reline material in the prosthesis. With the plaster, develop the model, and with the silicone, put on the prosthesis in order to obtain the volume of the prosthesis. After the curing, open the mask, remove the prosthesis for the patient, and now I place some other plaster inside the pink silicone and press in the master cast. Now it's very easy to have a duplicate of the prosthesis made by plaster and start again to place in the articulator, the upper, the lower, and it's time to select the new commercial teeth with the right shade and shape. And now I like to start to cut the plaster prosthesis in two parts, one in position, and I start with the other side. After, with the second part, and more or less the setup is ready, and it's like a mobile prosthesis with the flange. Put into the flask the first and the second part. Now remove the wax, open the flask, and it's time to sandblast the commercial teeth to have a better link with the new pink acrylic. Select one acrylic. This is one example of acrylic, high impact acrylic for implant work. Now mix and press. After the curing, it's time to open and check again the occlusion. And more or less is the copy of the existing mobile prosthesis of the patient, but with a new material, especially in the wearability resistance. And it's time to grind the board and also the internal part of the restoration. And now it's time to make some retention with the little round bar to have a good retention during the reline procedure. And only now, also this restoration is ready for the surgery.
No, this is another. That was a restoration made for a patient that was already fully edentulous.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, you copy some information from the existing denture.
Yes.
Okay, given that this denture was more or less okay. If it's not okay, we will probably make another denture.
I think it's better if you stop immediately after the setup, and when the setup is ready in wax, you try in the mouth, especially if you increase the vertical dimension or change some parameters.
Similarly to when we are doing a just simple denture, okay?
Yes.
Until we have the correct vertical dimension, lip support, smile line, all these things, midline and so on, we will not finish the work, okay? And this is exactly the same. So, but I think this is not so specific for our technique. For our technique, what is important is to make a correct manufacturing of the shell. What if the patient has a terminal dentition and the doctors tells you that he will just extract every teeth, but he will also open flap, remove some bone because there are defects or whatever is the problem, and so you will have a lot of more space in addition to the space provided by the teeth dimension.
For sure, it's a very important information for me, but the starting point doesn't change. You place the model in relation, and for me, it's time to select the shape and the color of the new teeth, and start to place in position the new teeth. Only 10 teeth, because the patient have 10 teeth now and 10 teeth after the surgery, for sure. One side of the setup is ready. Now with the same approach, start the other side. And now the setup is completely ready. But it's time to improve the restoration with the pink part, and how many millimeter is right in the paper, and is information given by the doctor. And now the same approach of the mobile prosthesis. In the flask, sandblast it, mix one high impact acrylic, press, curing, check again the occlusion, and again the restoration is completely full and needed to a big internal reduction, some retention, and only now is ready for the day of the surgery.
It is correct to say that when you do a hybrid shell for a hybrid restoration, you mostly use full contour teeth.
Yeah,
And when you do a socket fit shell, you use more often a veneer, or this is a wrong simplification?
But in the hybrid restoration, for sure, it is impossible to use the veneer, because when you press the pink acrylic, you have the lingual surface made by pink part. And when you have the socket fit restoration, you have a double possibility. You have both possibility, depend of your approach. For sure, when you use a full contour teeth, the full contour is more stable, because have a lot of contact point in the plaster, and with a little drop of wax stay in position. When you select only veneer and close and bite with upper or lower arch, sometimes it's possible to broken the link between the wax. Is more long in this particular approach.
It's more brittle during
Yes.
the drying. Has to be more careful.
Yes.
Okay.
Only this is the difference.
But it's more. What is more beautiful?
No.
No.
Is immediately empty and with the veneer approach, and is completely to carve the internal surface when you use the full contour.
Okay.
More
So
or less.
if you are more experienced and you have done more cases probably, then you can save time by using the veneer
The veneer,
approach.
yes,
Okay.
for
But
sure.
for the beginners, they could be a little bit more tricky at the beginning.
Yeah,
Is this-
especially in the intraoral step procedure, because the PMMA is not elastic, but is more elastic than the composite, and for sure you given a lot of elasticity to the restoration.
Okay.
The last case is not a full arch, because for me the approach is the same. If you have a big bridge, like in this case, select the teeth, more or less with the same shape, and start with the same approach. Remove and put in position, remove and place in position the incisor, and after a bridge in the posterior. Now it's time to increase the lingual surface and get the mask. Now remove the vase, sandblast it, place again in position, and press one acrylic. After the curing, open the mask, check occlusion, some rubber, polish, color, and it's time to grinding inside the restoration to have a completely empty restoration. Because in conclusion, the prosthetic shell for the well-done approach is a completely empty restoration, and the empty space has to be 10 millimeter in order to contain the future framework, because the minimum dimension of the framework is 7 millimeter.
Okay. So the limit is 8 and 10. Between 8 and 10.
Yes.
Not more than 10,
And not less of 8.
not less than 8. Okay. So I think this is an important guideline. So if your lab technician makes shells that are wider than 10, it may look easier for you, but you can be confused and misled during the relining, the intraoral relining procedure, because the shell is too wide, so it accommodates, but mistakenly. Okay, so it can confuse you. So it is better that you follow Gianluca's advice. So make a shell that is 10 millimeter in the wider part and 8 millimeter when it comes to the embrasure area. Okay, so now let's see one case. Is the patient that comes in the office with some terminal dentition, and we discuss with him. I noticed that the dentition is compromised, but the bone is okay. So I decide that there is no need to open the soft tissue and make any kind of flap, any kind of osteoplasty. So this is going to be a socket fit restoration. So I need a white shell. So Gianluca will get this information together with other information, like, if I like the midline where it is, or if I want to shift this, if I want a different color, if I want a different length, shape, orientation, smile line, and so on.
But in this particular case, the patient don't have the incisor, but have the cuspid, and that for sure is a good help. Now it's time to select the material to assemble the restoration, the commercial teeth, one acrylic, and start to remove completely the incisor and place in position the new 4 incisor. After, remove the cuspid and place in position the cuspid and the posterior. And in the other side, the same approach, remove and place in position. And now it's time to increase. Remember the 10 millimeter of the rule. Increase the lingual surface and get the mask. Remove the wax, clean, sandblast it again. Select one acrylic, press, curing, and open the mask. Now check again the occlusion. Polish, some color, and now it's time to grind because the restoration is completely full and need a big internal reduction, and only now is ready for the surgery.
So this is what I get from Gianluca. So I now will do my surgery, extracting the teeth and opening flap or not opening the flap. This is other kind of decision. And today we don't discuss this. So once I have removed the teeth, I grab the shell and I try this immediately. And before I ask the patient to bite down, I look at the gingival contour, the scallop. If this is okay, if I like how it is, if any parabola or whatever is wrong, I need to study and see if I can correct, make a tooth longer, make a tooth shorter, whatever. So this is an important step. And then I ask the patient to bite down, and I will check again, very empirically, the measure that I took before extracting the teeth. So vertical space and midline and so on. So once everything is fine, then I start to place implant. So you can put implant through guide surgery or through a freehand procedure, okay? So both technique works. Obviously, as this has to be a socket fit restoration, with guide surgery, it is more likely that you will place the implant in the correct position with the correct axis. If you work freehand, then you have to be very attentive and very careful to place the implant in the correct space. This is why when you are doing what I call a brain guide surgery in a socket fit restoration approach, I think you should slow down. I think you should just make a little drill with the pilot, burr, and then put a pin, then use the shell every time to check if what you are going to do is in the correct position with the correct axis. Because if it is not, you still have all the time and the freedom to change this and to make it better. So no rush, do whatever is necessary, and use the shell as your intraoral guide. Every time you put an implant, you check with the shell and be sure that you are going in the right direction until you have placed all of them, and always use the shell to check this completely, okay? So the shell can really help you. That is why it's so important that it's correctly made. Okay, so you have now placed all the implants, and you may want to do some site preservation, so you will reduce the amount of shrinkage after healing time. And so you now put the abutment. What abutment depends from the type of restoration that you are aiming to. So if it's conometric, you would put conometric. If it's screw-retained abutment level, you would put abutment and cylinder. If it's screw-retained implant level, like this case here, then you put the implant level abutment. Okay, so these are 6 implant level abutment for the XI implant. And what is the purpose of this picture? Just to show you the axis of this, that are not too much disparallel. Now, parallelism is not mandatory in case like this, okay? As the connection is no longer indexed, so these implants are XI with a deep X inside, but we have transformed the abutment in a round connection that is also shorter than the original 3 millimeters. So your abutment gives you a lot of freedom, even if the implants are not pretty much parallel. Okay? But nevertheless, you put every abutment and you check if the axes are fine. Then the next step is to make the framework. So you will grab a wire that have to be the 2.0 wire, and then you have to take 2 decisions, distant from the soft tissue and welding position buccally or lingually. Most often in the maxilla it will be lingually. And so once you have decided this, what you have to do is to bend the wire in a way that the wire will be in contact, more or less in passive contact, with every abutment before you start to do the welding procedure. So here is your wire, and you have done 1 bending and 2 bendings. So not so many steps. A couple of bendings with the dedicated clamps are enough to shape your arch and to get the contact with every abutment. Then it can be that on some abutment you are a little bit distant. Spend a little bit more time to shape a little bit more the wire until you are more or less in contact. Finally, you are ready for welding. With one hand, here is replaced by an hemostat to avoid to have the hand in front of the lens. Okay, so with one hand you hold the wire, with the second hand you hold the clamp, and you put the clamp as I told you in lesson number 3, a 90-degree perpendicular to the wire, where the most important electrode is the one against the wire that has to be parallel. Then remember to release completely the clamp. Don't hold this. Let the clamp do the job for you. So this is not released completely yet, not yet again, and this is now completely released. At this point, the clamp is pressing the 2 pieces of metal one against the other with the predetermined force that we have established as the correct one to create the best welding joint. Okay, so you have now released the clamp, the 2 pieces are somehow squeezed together. You still have to weld. Before you start welding, you zoom out and look if the wire is more or less in the position that it has at the beginning of the procedure. It might be that once you release the clamp, the wire maybe is dislocated somewhere, somehow. So you have to check that this doesn't happen. Otherwise, then you will have a problem because the next on steps you have a distance between the wire and the abutment. So release the clamp, have a look. If the clamp is passively relining against the abutment, you can move to the next step. If it is not, put down the clamp, grab once again one of the pliers, bend a little bit the wire until you are in contact. Okay, so these steps are fundamental and important. Okay, now let's say everything is fine, the clamp is released, the two pieces are in contact. You ask your assistants to activate the welding machine. You press your foot pedal and you do the welding. And after the electricity has been released, it is preferred to wait 3 seconds to let the heating disappear through the clamp. So you wait 3 seconds, or you ask someone of your staff just to spray some cold water immediately after the welding. So you repeat the procedure, moving to the next contiguous cylinder. You don't jump from one side to the other, always to the next adjacent abutment, so you do not introduce any tension whatsoever. And finally, you have finished. This procedure is not going to take to you more than half a minute. Okay? It takes more to me to explain, but it takes 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, you have a framework that, if it's correctly designed and planned, will last for so many years without generating any kind of problem for you whatsoever. So, spend these minutes correctly to make a nice framework. If you want to check the passivity, you can leave one screw, apply some force, always using 2 fingers, and see if you have any tension. Very unlikely, but let's see if you have any rocking, any activities into your framework. Then if you have, you need to correct this. We will see in another lesson, okay? Or if you come to visit us, we will be happy to tell you every tips and tricks. Now, remove the framework and hand it to your lab technician that I suggest is chairside with you. A lab technician loves to stay in their labs, but sometimes we need to extract them and to summon them in the office, because I think it's much easier and the final result is better.
Yeah, now, extraorally, it's very easy to improve the framework and add some vertical support for the missing teeth with the 1.2 wire and low program for don't change the precision given in the mouse. And if you have a cantilever, it's time to increase the framework in the cantilever with a second 2 mm of wire in the last abutment in the direction of the cantilever, in one side and also in the other side, if you have 2 cantilever. And now it's possible to check the framework inside the shell, but for sure I think it's better if you immediately cut the cylinder, the length of the cylinder, immediately over the main wire. With the disc, you cut the cylinder, and now check again in the shell. If more or less fit in the shell, it's time to sandblast it and cover the framework with one opaque. I like very more opaque because it's very easy to cover the gray color of the metal, and this is self-curing. And this is a big advantage, especially in your office. This is the opaque. It's possible to have dentin or pink color. And when the opaque is ready, it's possible to close the hole of the screw with a little wax, orthodontic wax. It's very easy to fill the hole of the screw. And it's time to try in the mouth.
So this is what I get from Gianluca. I just press this, and on the 6th implant, this is an implant level with an internal connection, so no screw are necessary to retain the framework. The framework is stabilized by the index. Obviously, you have to try this, because if for any reason it is lifting from one side, not because is ill-fitting, but just because there is some tolerance in the connection. So if there is any movement, then it's better to add the screw. But this 99% of the case is not necessary. So now you take the shell and you make the try. Okay, this is the first try that you do. You have not tried anything with the bar so far. So you put the bar, you put the shell. If the shell is touching, is hitting, if there is any obstacle to the fitting on the shell on the framework, you can cut some metal or remove some acrylic, whatever fits best to you. But at the end, the shell has to fit passively in, out on the shell, on the framework. Then you ask the patient to bite down very gently, okay, and you check again the same parameter, midline, vertical, and so on. And this is the end of the try. So you end the shell back to Gianluca, okay? And Gianluca will move forward.
Now it's time to clean the saliva or blood, remove to the saliva or blood, and sandblasting inside the shell, and put on the primer for open the link between the PMMA of the shell and the reline material. Now select one reline material like the diacrylate, and it's time to fill completely the shell, and now it's time to place in the mouth.
Okay, you put, once I got this from Gianluca, I put on the framework. There is nothing to try because we have just done this try here, so no surprise now. You just put it in position, ask the patient to bite down, and wait for the time that is necessary for the material to set. Okay? Could be 3 minutes, could be 7 minutes, depending from the material, if it is self-curing or not, and so on. Very importantly, the patient is advised not to move, not to open the mouth, nothing at all during this procedure. And you just wait. When everything is set, the material is hardened. Before you remove it, you can check with some articulated paper if there is any misfitting, whatever, and probably prematurity. And so, if there are any, once Gianluca works on this to finish this, can also adjust the occlusion. So now you remove it completely. Is implant level restoration, so there is no problem with any kind of undercut, and so on. Everything will come out with you, and finally I hand it back for the last time to Gianluca to finish the procedure.
Now, extraorally, it's time to fill the gap and add some material to improve the compression, to create the ovate pontic. And it's very important to have a very convexity restoration. And only after it's time to open the hole of the screw in this way with this long drill. It's very easy. Open the little hole and improve the dimension of the hole and try if it's possible or not to pass with the final screw. And now it's time to improve the embrasure, polish, and the restoration is ready for the mouth.
So, it is certainly some work to do a restoration like this, as the lab technician has to develop all the pontics and the emergence profile and the scallop and so on. And how does he know this information? Well, as I say, the best is that he's sure-siding. He's siding the doctor, at least during some step of the procedure, so he can see and they can discuss. Like, I want a compression here, and is it better to add material, or is it better to remove some soft tissue or even some bone, and so on. So it is a joint work, okay? And this is also another important thing is that we let the relining material to read what is underneath, okay? I mean, in the intaglio surface, okay? So if you put any barrier, like a rubber dam, things like this that someone used for a reason not so clear to me, but maybe to protect the contamination of underlying implant or what, but biomaterial to be trapped, whatever is your purpose, we don't think is a good idea, because then your relining material will not read what is the situation under there. Okay? So it's important that the lab technician is side with you, at least at this step, and that you discuss where you want the pontics, how you want the compression, the emergence profile. If you need to support some unsupported marginal gingival tissue, or if you need, on the contrary, to under-contour the crown to encourage the soft tissue to come a little bit down. So there are so many things, and this is not a waste of time. I understand it's just a temporary, someone say. I understand, but the temporary is the key for the final. So all the time you will spend to make a better temporary, to make the correct emergence and so on, you will find this, you will gain this later, and you will be able to make a much better and nice looking and easier procedure for the final restoration. So we are now to the conclusion. Now to the conclusion, and this is your final work. You see, it's a socket fit with not much invasiveness during the surgery. So, some convenient slides, and this is everything for this lesson today on the analog approach to the process manufacturing for the immediate body prosthesis with the intraoral welding and econometric concept. Now in the next lesson, we will see how to make still a prosthetic shell, but with the digital approach. There are many kind of material in blocks and disk and different kind of digital approach. We will see and discuss this in the next lesson. So thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you and to meet you virtually again in the next lesson. Thank you very much, and arrivederci.
Arrivederci.